Hi, my name is Els Dragt. I'm an independent freelance trend researcher, trainer, and writer living in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. And I'm also a volunteer at Teach the Future. I joined Teach the Future because I feel it's important for youngsters to realize that the future is open, the future can be changed, and it is theirs to change it. I realized this myself when I started teaching trends to bachelor students at an academy in the Netherlands. What I saw happening is when you teach the future, whether you do trend research, scenario planning, or any type of other futures thinking related activity, is that a lot of young people suddenly realize, wow, there's a whole world around me. I can explore it in various ways. And the future is very open, it's uncertain, and therefore, this also gives me a lot of freedom and space to add to the future what I would like to add to the future. Of course, it's not always easy for everyone. So there are also students who struggle with this openness and uncertainty of the future because they rather would have a method or a way that will give only one answer, which is very binary, which is black or white, no gray areas. So it's also interesting to see how teaching the future also shows you immediately as a teacher what type of personalities your students have. Erika Bol was a colleague of mine at the academy that I worked at, so we were both teachers, and she approached me to help her communicate about Teach the Future. My background is also in communication science and studies. And what I've learned from this mainly is that when you don't communicate about something, it just doesn't exist for others. So when you're a nonprofit like Teach the Future, you do all kinds of good work, you do all kinds of activities. But when you don't share about them and when you don't communicate about them, nobody will know that you exist and you cannot create a movement. So I started out with helping Erika communicate via the social media of Teach the Future, mainly for the Dutch chapter hub of Teach the Future. But somewhere along the lines, it evolved in doing it for the whole Teach the Future global organization. So I mainly post things on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, create a newsletter, think about ways of redesigning the website, drafting texts for the website, all that kind of stuff. So I'm not actively doing the teaching activities for Teach the Future, but much more communicate about what we do. To learn from each other, to share best practices, do's and don'ts, share failures, of course, too, and to help each other get the movement growing. Because, as I said, I feel the thinking about the future is a life skill. You can use it in everyday life. You don't have to be a professional futures thinker, but it's something you can, as a individual, you can incorporate into your own life. Having said that, a community of futures is a good thing, but it can also sometimes something to watch out for. At least what I feel is that you don't get too narrow-minded when you only talk to people who are also futures thinkers, who are also very well known with the methodology. You might get a blind spot on how to communicate and talk to people about futures thinking who don't know anything about it. So I think as a futures community, this is also something we should watch out for and be aware of, and try to make it as accessible as we can for everyone around the globe. I think life in general is presenting a lot of challenges, and it has always did so. Of course, nowadays we are like uber connected, and things spread globally very fast. So that makes it maybe a bit more complex than it used to be, than daily life used to be. But I think um, having future skills like dealing with uncertainty, thinking about for the long term, not only on the short term, thinking about what your actions, what kind of consequences they can have for other people. This kind of systems thinking can really help you in coping with uncertain futures and coping in your daily life. I think there's also things going on already in education, whether primary, secondary, college, university, that might not be labeled as futures thinking yet, but um, are actually activities that we would categorize as futures thinking skills. And maybe we should start with showing that there's already a lot done in education, because often when you approach teachers and say like, you need to add this to your toolbox, they would often feel a bit defensive. They're like, but I already do a lot of interesting things in my classrooms. Why should I add this new futures toolbox to my curriculum? So we also, as a Teach the Future community and as futures thinkers, should think about what is already happening in the world around us that's maybe now labeled differently. Where's the overlap? And how can we help people to see this, to become more aware of this? I think this will, in the end, also help us to integrate futures thinking more and literacy more into the curriculum, into classrooms all over the world. What I personally really like about being part of the Teach the Future community is that it's very international. People are very motivated, they are very socially conscious, they are very much into, helping education move forward, with the ultimate goal of also helping our next generations move forward. And that's something that I feel like, yeah, how could you be against it? Everybody should join. Yeah, because it all starts with education. I've worked for a lot of and trained also a lot of professionals in companies, but then you already see that they are like kind of set in their ways already. They find it harder to change, and their personality is already a bit more unchangeable. Whereas I feel that with younger people, especially kids, you can really add something to their personal and daily life, which they will take with them, throughout their whole life. So I feel you can have much more influence and impact when you start out with the younger people instead with the professionals and adults. So as I told you, I'm always communicating, thinking about the opportunities for communicating about the futures thinking activities related to education, because we teach the future. So if you have anything interesting to share, if you see an article, read a book, which you feel like, oh, that's really interesting for the people that Teach the Future, the Teach the Future community, please share it with me because we can then share it via our socials or in our newsletter.